As I've been saying from the very beginning of this crisis, it will be the economy that will have the biggest impact here. And now we're getting similar messages even from the IMF that just came out with a statement saying that the world will, quote, very likely experience the worst recession since the 1930s. But right now, the conversation in the United States is about supposedly opening the economy, as Donald Trump announced that soon he will declare the economy back open again, while, of course, other people like Dr. Fauci says we're not ready, including also other individuals like the president of the Federal Reserve in Minneapolis, who is saying, as of just 2 days ago, that America should be ready for 18 months of shutdown. And when you look at the economy, especially in the United States, I think it's a little bit too late and the damage has already been done. The hooch has already been screwed over, as of course we have terrible decisions that have been made by the Federal Reserve, the Treasury Secretary, and Donald Trump that has essentially ended the free market and rewarded the bad actors from 2018 that made this situation that much worse. So, in my opinion, Tim, a little bit too late. Is there any way of putting the genie back in the bottle? Is there any way going back to this from your expertise, Tim?
No, there's maybe a way going back to this for the big banks and big pharma and for the vaccine manufacturers and for the military industrial complex. I think those...
And Walmart, that's investing in China right now. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's a way for those guys, to be back on, their game and being back up, making more profits than ever. But when it comes to the average person out there, I think, Humpty Dumpty's broken. You're not putting them back together again. But the main crux of all this, and I hate to keep droning on about this, and I love when people say, oh, how come we don't talk about the Federal Reserve? I talk about the Federal Reserve almost every single time. But anyways, the main problem is that we have to borrow our money into existence. And until you actually fix that problem, and by fixing it, I mean getting rid of the Federal Reserve, getting rid of debt-based money, all of this there's no amount of other political football issues or do a little bit over here or a little bit over there to try to fix things, because there's no way you can fix something that was built on a broken foundation. And so, and then with Trump coming in and, basically adding to the swamp with adding all of his Goldman Sachs, cronies that are in there, I'm very, very disappointed, because I did have some hope in him. And I did think that, when he was talking about making tweets about the Fed, saying it's very important that we audit the Fed and, sending out dog whistles to our entire community and then backing away from that, I felt that was a pretty big betrayal. But getting into this article over here, Morgan Stanley, the bad actors of the last cycle are getting bailed out. There is a certain paradox behind the coronavirus. On the one hand, it is a human, social, and economic tragedy of unprecedented proportions, with tens of thousands of people dead around the globe, millions affected, tens of millions unemployed, small and medium businesses decimated, countless companies on the verge of bankruptcy, and the global economy in a hopefully brief depression. Morgan Stanley's chief U.S. equity strategist explaining and admitting what so many can only whisper behind closed doors for fears of being branded as conspiracy theorists or being suspended from social media networks. But the bottom line for us, and this is, again, Morgan Stanley's chief equity strategist talking, is the latest move is very much in line with our prior view that investors should not have any doubts about the Fed's resolve to do whatever it takes to make sure this recession doesn't turn into a depression. In fact, they now appear to be trying to limit the healthy damage we typically get from a garden variety recessions. As noted in our prior research, we think that the nature of this recession, the unprecedented suddenness and trajectory of the contraction centered on a health crisis, has provided absolute cover for policymakers to go well beyond traditional support. As such, the bad actors of the last cycle are getting bailed out, which could ultimately limit the malaise we typically get in a recession. In short, the worst stocks will have the biggest recoveries. And so, there we see it again. The people who caused this, are always getting bailed out. Over here we have on screen, a picture of Jim Cramer where it shows, stocks having the best week since 1938. And then meanwhile, there's a chart that shows the S&P 500 rocketing higher, while the U.S. jobless claim is just a hockey stick downwards. What was that, Luke? You want to jump in there?
Well, there's a big question in our kind of circle, and that usually is Q Bono. Who benefits? If you look at this entire crisis, there's people benefiting off of this tremendously. in ways that we don't even know about. I mean, a lot of people in the media and in the public are talking about this 2.2 trillion stimulus package, where 250 billion of that actually goes directly to you in this bureaucratic way that's going to take months and months for it to finally get there. But there's also, chats and murmur of potentially $6 trillion being siphoned off in secret maneuvers by the Federal Reserve, directly going to, of course, the people that you're mentioning now, to the hedge funds, to the people that brought us into this situation with reckless behavior that made us so unsafe not to be able to weather this storm. This is a major storm, and I think many people should be asking Q Bono, especially with the first article that I mentioned, with this Federal Reserve Bank president of Minneapolis saying 18 months shutdown. When we're getting the reports now of again, the projections being wrong, the hospitals not being inundated, luckily, you have to kind of ask yourself what's really happening here behind the scenes, and Q Bono, who benefits? That's a big one.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. I mean, you always have to look behind the money and see who's the one who's getting bailed out, who are they working hard for, and this is a perfect, intro into Neel Kashkari. So in 2000, I guess technically it's 2009, he was getting grilled on Capitol Hill, and this is before he was a Federal Reserve governor. Not sure what his capacity was at the time, but he was getting grilled, and one of the senators, and again, I don't have a lot of respect for any of these senators, or no respect pretty much for any of them, maybe besides Rand Paul. But with that said, the senator grills him, and of course now you can't find any of this stuff on YouTube, so if you guys want to link this down below, it'd help me out. But what it said, it goes, listen, we have no doubt that you were working hard. Our only question is, who are you working hard for? And that was basically a direct shot from the senator, implying that he was working hard for the banks. Well, now, that's just a resume builder to then now put him on the board of governors of the Federal Reserve System. Lots of chatter that he will actually be the next Federal Reserve chair. But yeah, getting into the article, America should be ready for 18 months of shutdowns in a long, hard road ahead, warns Fed's Neel Kashkari. And we have these waves of flare-ups and controls until we actually get a therapy or vaccine, he said. We need to find ways of getting the people who are healthy, who are at lower risk, back to work, and then providing the assistance to those who are at most risk, who are going to need to be quarantined or isolated in the foreseeable future. So Q Bono, who's going to benefit? Okay, the vaccine manufacturers. This could be a long, hard road that we have ahead of us until we either get an effective therapy or a vaccine, he said. It's hard for me to see a V-shaped recovery under that scenario. And, I guess speaking of long and hard, you also have adult toy companies that have a 38% skyrocketing since all this broke down. I didn't actually plan for that to go into... Okay.
Hey, if you're getting screwed by the government, you might as well screw yourself at the same time, right? So,
one of the other things that's going on is I think it was Durex, or one of their manufacturing facilities, or a lot of their manufacturing facilities in Malaysia are shut down. So there actually is now a condom shortage going on worldwide, and so people get screwed in more ways than one. But anyways, people that are we're going to go to Jim Cramer, go to MarketWatch. 43% of small businesses say they'll be forced to close permanently if they don't get help soon. So unfortunately, a lot of this help is coming too little too late. And though 43% of the 500 polled businessmen say they can't survive without some sort of government assistance, and or change in economic conditions, 46% say the economy needs between 6 months and a year to find its way. Then you have the index, blah, 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 blah. And basically, a lot of these companies are going to have to start going bankrupt if they don't get money soon. But, don't tell that to Jim Cramer, though, because Jim Cramer is feeling confident about the future. Now, in this article,
I was literally going to jump into that. I'm like, no, Tim, you're totally wrong. We have Jim Cramer giving us confidence in this economy. Everything's going to be fine. Listen to the mainstream media, Tim. Don't worry.
Yeah, and we don't do like a gigantic amount of show prep. Basically, it's like, hey, here's the articles I want to talk about. So, none of this is really, planned. So, as you see in this article, the worst case scenario has been taken off the table. And if Apple and Google can do contact tracing that we all embrace, while we continue to roll out more testing, the economy could reopen a lot sooner than we thought. 3 weeks ago, the Mad Money host said. Now, I'm going to get back to that phrase in a little bit. Contact tracing, because I read that, I'm like, what the hell is contact tracing? And I sort of just glossed over it, skipped over it, went back to the rest of the article, and before I ended up realizing what it meant. And so as we go back here, it says, I figured a retest was virtually, let's just say, inevitable. He's talking about retesting the lows of the stock market. But now I'm feeling more confident about the future, he concluded after the market closed. On top of the historic multi-trillion-dollar federal spending package that is now underway to help mitigate the economic damage of the coronavirus pandemic, he applauded the Federal Reserve's move to go nuclear and the latest of a string of responses from the central bank with a $2.3 trillion bond buying program for troubled companies and local governments. This measure could potentially help the slumping oil industry. And I do want to point out the oil industry because it's not necessarily about the oil stocks. It's about the oil bonds. A lot of this is about the bonds because the bonds, so what a bond is, if you lend money to a company, you're going to buy some of their bonds. Those bonds is basically you are now the highest claim holder of that company. So the problem is a lot of these bonds are going to become worthless as these companies are not going to be making any money. A huge amount of the junk bonds are the oil companies. And so now the Federal Reserve is going in and buying the junk bonds, aka they're going to be the highest claim holder of the oil companies if they go bankrupt, aka they're going to own the oil companies if they end up going bankrupt. And so this is a path for the Fed to own everything. Our good friend John Sneisen 3 years ago wrote a post about the Japanification of America and how eventually the Fed will own everything. But getting back to this very important phrase from the article here, that means more money going back into stocks, especially ones with good dividend records, Kramer said. Actually, that wasn't the one I wanted to talk about. But I think, let's get back to contact tracing. Kramer also applauded Apple and Google, blah, blah, blah. The companies announced Friday they would roll out iPhone and Android apps that will help track the spread of coronavirus and alert users who came into contact with others who have tested positive for COVID-19. These tools are expected to be available in May. I think this partnership is huge. It's probably the only way we get contact tracing in America, Kramer said. Adding that contact tracing is essentially stopping this thing. And so actually, and here we go, right up in breaking news that flash while we're reading this. Coronavirus live updates, vaccine race picks up. Banks offer bills relief for millions of Americans. And so essentially what they are saying here, Luke, is that the answer to all this is to have, the big tech companies basically being able to give the government to the data to then say, okay, and even there was another thing that flashed on screen while I was reading this that showed Apple Maps is now going to use their program to say, hey, you're not social distancing. And so now the big techs are going to act as this, technocracy, big brother tattletale system of saying you're
just now or always, because that's what they've always been doing. That's
good point.
I mean, they were started, a lot of these big tech companies were started with seed funding or with direct intervention from government. We also have to understand
In-Q-Tel is the actual private equity firm of the CIA, and they were the ones who started Google. That's not even a conspiracy.
They had a lot of seed funding and investments in a lot of startups. A lot of them took off, and a lot of them, of course, have close relationships with the authorities when it comes to sharing every little thing about you to them, as well as not just the governments, but also to the highest bidder. But the system that you're talking about is this kind of, digital kind of certificate. It's already in play in China. And in China, you have to download. It's mandatory there. It's going to be interesting to see how it's going to play out here in the United States. But I did a video about this just a few days ago, specifically talking about the Chinese kind of Orwellian dystopian approach and what to look out for here in the United States on the main We Are Change channel. I could look up that video right now really quickly just to give you the title of it. But essentially, we have to understand here, there's a lot of things happening. The situation's very fast developing. It's very interesting to see the federal response and also the state response. When you look at states' responses, like, of course, Michigan, when you compare it to other states that are not listening to the stay-at-home orders, again, there's 3 states that are just totally not listening to any of the recommendations by the federal government, which has essentially been having a handoff approach. The state governments have been implementing different things in their own kind of unique ways. Jurisdictions, some of them have been totally overblown, have been totally power hungry and crazy, while some of them have been more kind of understanding and realistic with their approach. So the video that I specifically did was called "The Bio Lab in China got U.S. funding. What you should know." And in that video, a couple of days ago, I was directly going into the bigger kind of digital health certificates already in play in China. There's another video, Papers, Please. The bigger threat might be government now. Also on the main channel, you should definitely check that one out 3 days ago, going into, of course, a lot of the bigger kind of dystopian measures. So that's all I have on this particular topic. Again, the economy is something to look out for. Me and Tim weren't planning to talk about the economy on this YouTube channel, but because it's such an impactful and important way. I mean, I always knew the economic system was a scam. But now, after really diving deep into it, looking into it, researching and studying it every day with Tim, I'm like, holy cow. I can't imagine the crap that's happening that we still don't know about. So there's still a lot to learn. That's all I have to say from here. Anything else you want to say? And do you want to end it here, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, just real quickly, we've got, I guess, on screen we got Goldman Sachs is basically saying that everyone's just going to discount Q1, and that because they're discounting this quarter, that that stocks are going to be back up, and don't worry. Donald Trump says Donald Trump and the Fed have ended the free market, and so I absolutely do agree with that. We got J.P. Morgan profits drop as bank braces for severe recessions, and they've had just a huge amount of loans that are going sour over there. Fact check, Trump claimed, maybe we'll do this on another video, but Trump claims it's his call on when to reopen the economy. I think that's probably a juicy subject that we can maybe get into later. A little bit about what is the economy will look like once we get it reopened, and whether or not Trump even has that call or not. And then, we did talk about the adult toy industry. And while you're talking, I did flash on screen the CIA.gov, where it actually talks about their relationship with In-Q-Tel. So it does sound like something kind of fantastical when I make these big claims about these different things. But definitely, that's all I've got today. And I appreciate everybody who put their Team Tim comments in the video yesterday. I know Luke isn't too happy about that, but anyways,
what are you talking about?
No,
Tim, not happy. What? We're gonna debate you, son of a gun. And not the end of it. Again, we're all here for a discussion and to learn, and I'm not here for positive comments and an ego boost. I'm here to share the important information that we all learn from. So stay tuned for more. I want another debate if you want to go at it that way, you son of a gun, here on Change the News.